Hi, welcome back to Forgiving What You Can't Forget. My name is Ben. I'm one of the pastors here at Hope, and I'm so honored to be here with you as we dig into this study. We have been talking about what forgiveness looks like, how it works, how we do it, and the why, which is much deeper and much more beautiful than I think that you've been able to find. And in this session, we're going to take it a little bit further. So what we're going to do is we're going to go way back to the beginning. All the way back. Now, when you were a baby, you were a blank slate. You didn't have any dreams. You didn't have any hopes. You didn't have any fears. Everything was as surprising as this baby's face makes it look. And when we think about the story that we've lived, we can take all of it for granted. But what we learned from Lysa in these two chapters, chapters 5 and chapter 6, and the way that we go forward together, it's really about going back in order to go forward. Really about trying to understand our past better so that we can understand why we are the way that we are, why we make the decisions that we do. What were our dreams at the beginning? What are the ways that we carry wounds from things that go back all the way back to our childhood? And so as we dig in a little bit, we want to invite you back into that space and into reflecting, because the goal is to collect the dots, the things in your life that maybe on the surface and maybe in the way that you've thought about them in the past haven't really seemed that meaningful. But once you put them all together and then you start to connect the dots, you can start to see themes like red threads through your life that kind of shape the way that you conceptualize yourself as a person, the way that you think about God, the way that you think about life as it is, and the way the world works. So these kinds of things really shape us. And I like to think about it this way. We are people that are formed by stories. We need to learn how to understand how our past shapes us so that we can make different choices going forward. So that's kind of what these two chapters, chapters 5 and 6, are about in Forgiving What You Can't Forget. And as you think about stories, I want you to think about your story, but I brought a story too. This is a book that I read to my kids, and it's also a book that was read to me when I was a kid. It's called The Tale of the Three Trees, and it's an old folk tale. And maybe you've heard it before. It's a Christian story. It starts out, once upon a mountaintop, three trees dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. And when you think about these three trees, think about it like your own dreams. I want to hold treasure, the first tree said. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. I want to be a strong sailing ship, the second tree said. I will be the strongest ship in the world. I don't want to leave this mountain at all, the third tree said. I want to grow up so tall that people look at me and they will raise their eyes to heaven and they will think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. When you think about yourself being a blank slate in that baby sense, the dreams that you have in your life are formed by the stories that maybe your parents told you. When you read chapter 5, Lysa goes through her childhood and talks about the ways that she was raised and the situation she was in and the ways that her grandmother treated her mom and the ways that her dad left and the ways that she experienced abuse and the ways that she emotionally responded to the abuse and the ways that different people throughout her life hurt her. I love the way that she says, in the beginning of chapter 6, I hope that my story invites you to think about your story. Because that's exactly what it did to me. As she was thinking and talking about her story of struggle on the playground at school, I thought of specific things that happened to me when I was struggling in the playground at that very same age. This is an opportunity, and as you go through this chapter, I really hope you will take the time, just like she suggests, and just like your study guide suggests, to really lay out, even if you do it literally or not, to really lay out your story. This is a really important part of discipleship and an important part of growth. And one of the stereotypes of therapists is they always make you talk about your childhood. And I'm like, I don't need that. Here's the thing. Those things shape you more than you realize. And without realizing and without facing those things, you can't really know at the very heart what kind of makes you tick. So when you think about your story, invite yourself to go back. Invite yourself to think about things that seem insignificant at the time. And when you do, you will see that all those things work together to shape you into the person that you are. There's this beautiful quote on page 69. Those things that happen in our lives don't just tell a story. They inform us of the story we tell ourselves. And I think this is a really beautiful way to put it. You might not realize that you are telling yourself a story. You might not realize that that story is in some ways facilitating your growth and your healing. And you might not realize that that story in some ways is thwarting your healing and your growth. You might not realize that there's some ways that that story might be in line with God's story for you, or you might not realize there's some ways that that story is not in line with what God is saying. And when we kind of go back and we collect all the dots, we collect all the events, and we hold each one up and we think about the memories that we have, we can start to think, you know what, this has a bigger impact on me than I even realized. Think about it. Every single person who's ever been bit by a dog is afraid of a dog, or every single person that's afraid of a dog has some experience of being bit or being barked at or witnessing somebody being bit. It's the same way with different seasons and different struggles in your life, different situations. You might not think that it was a big deal that you grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, but that shaped the way that you think about yourself. You might not think it's a big deal that your parents got divorced, but maybe it is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than you think. You might not think it's a big deal that you always felt like you weren't the favorite child. And it's kind of like a joke around your house, you know, so-and-so's the golden child and everybody else is playing for second. Well, those things shape us. And the way that we understand how those things shape us can help us understand the way that we see ourselves, just like this. They inform us of the story that we tell us about ourselves. And it affects the way that we think about God. It affects the way that we think about ourselves, and it affects the way that we relate to other people. So I'll give you an example. One of my, a woman that I love and appreciate in my life, somebody I know personally, grew up in the 1950s. And when she was a kid, her thing was cowboys. She wanted to be a cowboy with everything that she had. And of course, she was told that you can't be a cowboy, you're a girl. And she really kicked against that, and she really struggled with that. And then when she grew older and went to high school and was starting to think about what she would be in her career life, she thought about becoming a veterinarian. And it turns out that she was told the same thing. She has a specific, painful memory of a guidance counselor saying, you can't be a veterinarian, you're a woman. You can be a veterinary assistant. And over again, she has different examples of the way that she was told she can't because of her gender. And so this story became this thread that it was not just one defining moment, but lots of defining moments connected together that shaped the way that she thought about herself. And some of it's good. Some of it was her saying, you know what, I'm going to do what I can, and you can't tell me. And one of the things I admire most about this person is the way that as soon as she gets any hint that you are doubting her, she will prove you wrong. And the flip side is she had to fight against a lot of obstacles. So when we think about being shaped by these stories, think about it this way. When I was reading Lisa's book about the schoolyard, one of the things that I remember in my life was an event where my brother was being picked on by a bully at church youth group. I remember it really specifically, we were having sloppy joes in the fellowship center at the church where I grew up. And this kid was picking on my brother, and my brother started to cry. And I was sitting there. He was a couple years older than me, and my brother is younger than me, so he's quite a bit older than my brother. And I just burned with anger. And I remember throwing my sloppy joe at him and just slugging him in the face. Now you're trying to think, whoa, this is my pastor. He slugged a guy. When you think about these things, I'm not saying I was justified in my action, but the way that I was treated after that by this bully and by other people, they kind of respected me for standing up for my brother. And when I went through that experience, it was, again, one of those formative things. This is one of the dots that helped me think about my life in a certain way. And for the next year, I ended up fighting a lot. And I don't think it was just that experience. I had a lot of anger within me, and I didn't know how to express myself. And the more that I collect the different dots, the more that I think, well, here's the way that my dad had dealt with his anger. Well, here's the way that my mom had dealt with her anger. Here's the way that I didn't really have the words that I needed to express myself with words, so acting out was the only thing that I could think that would work. When we think about those things, we can collect those dots, and then we can really understand why we make the choices that we do. This is a really important part of the healing, and it's a painful process. You know, the example that I gave from my life is not nearly as raw and painful as some of the things that Lysa talks about in her book, where she talks about sexual abuse, and she talks about the fear of the person who abused her, and she talks about feeling like her friends had betrayed her so much. And in these things, it's a really vulnerable process. As you go through this process, know that right now this is just for you. This is not something you need to do with somebody, and it's not something you need to share with even the people that are most intimately connected with you if you're not ready. But what it is really letting yourself be seen by yourself. Letting myself see myself, and letting myself be seen by God. There's this beautiful, really important thing that happens when we let ourselves be seen by God. Lysa talks about one of her favorite Bible verses is Genesis 2:25. Now the man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. The thing is that this is the way that we're meant to exist and be in the presence of God. We're meant to live this way with God, to be completely seen by God and know that we don't need to be living in shame. And as we let ourselves go to this place where we let ourselves be seen, and we collect all the dots, and we start to connect the dots, and we hold these painful memories in tension, and we try to tell ourselves the story, we come to a really great understanding of who we are and why we are the way that we are. On page 84, Lysa writes, if we become more self-aware of how we are processing our thoughts and our perceptions and redirect those in more life-giving ways, then inside every loss, a more wise, empathetic, understanding, discerning, compassionate person of strength and humility has the potential to rise within us. This quote is really the why behind this work. It's hard work to go back. And it really is work that's not ever going to be done as long as we're in this world. We can still learn from things. That's why so many discipleship programs, whether it's the 12 steps, where you write out and make a fearless, searching moral inventory of yourself. Or there's another great author, his name's Terry Walling, and he talks about writing a life map. There's a great book called Emotional Healthy Spirituality that talks about going back in order to go forward. That this is such an integral part of the story because it helps us really be self-aware and helps us think critically about the story that we're telling ourselves. And then we can really grieve the losses that we need to grieve. The thing is that a lot of times we haven't really grieved the losses that we need to grieve. But when we do this work of holding the things that we've lost and letting ourselves grieve those things and then holding those things out to God, there's something really beautiful that happens. I love this quote on page 82. Everything that lost that we place in the hands of God isn't a forever loss. Think about that. Everything lost that we place in the hands of God isn't a forever loss. She goes on to quote Martin Luther, who says, "I've held many things in my hands, and I've lost them all. But whatever I place in God's hands, that I still possess." So that's the work of collecting these dots. It's about acknowledging the loss. Maybe that we've kind of diminished the loss, or kind of honestly even forgot that was even a thing. And then we let ourselves grieve that loss, and then we see the ways that those dots connect, and create a theme of fear or a theme of shame in our life, and then realize that theme doesn't have to have the same impact that we have always let it, unbeknownst to us, have on us. She talks about in 84 how to connect the dots, and are there times or seasons of the year that you should enjoy but you avoid? Are there places you should enjoy but you find yourself not wanting to go there? Are types of people you avoid? Like, these are indications that there are dots that we're not really connecting. You might not like a holiday, for instance, and you might just think, well, that's my preference. Maybe. Or maybe there's a painful experience you haven't really faced. And when you go through that process and when you look for the why, you realize that you don't have to be enslaved to your past the way that you have been. There's two choices that we have with our past. And this is a big part of the pastoral work that I am doing with a lot of folks, is you can either be a product of your past, and we think, well, I definitely don't want to do that, or you can be a prisoner to your past. You see, there's no third choice. We sometimes hold this myth that, you know what, there's stuff that I've gone through, but I'm just moving on, and I'm not going to let it affect me. I don't really think that's a choice, because we can't change the ways that we have experiences that are painful. We can't change what we've experienced, but we can choose how the experiences change us. We can't change the fact that we've experienced loss. But just because we've experienced loss doesn't mean that we can't also experience joy and hope and life and love. When you think about your story, are there certain things that you really need to go back and look at? I guarantee there are. When you think about your story, I guarantee you will be able to find some dots that maybe you haven't found. I've done lots of exercises like this throughout my time in self-reflection, but even reading this book, for the first time this week, I've learned in a deeper way some of the things that maybe I've taken for granted. But when we go back and we own the past, then we have a certain ability and chance to affect and have some choice about our future. And we can give over to God the things that we really need to give over to God. And we can find joy and hope and life in the things. So the tale of the three trees continues. Each tree, their dreams were dashed. The one that wanted to be a great treasure chest was taken to a carpenter's shop and was made into a feed box for animals. And this treasure chest couldn't imagine, being the one that has such a low job when he had such high aspirations. And the tree that dreamed of being a great sailing ship was made into a lowly fishing vessel. And then the tree that was cut down when all that she wanted was to be the tallest tree to stand up and point to God. Each one had their dreams dashed. It wasn't just about moving on from their past, but just like Martin Luther was saying, putting in the hands of God everything that we lost, I've lost everything I've ever held on to, but everything I've put in God's hands, I've never lost. You see, what happened was, on one dark and beautiful night, a woman placed her newborn baby in that feed box, and suddenly the first tree knew that he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. And one evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. When the storms arose, the second tree shuddered, but when the traveler stretched out his hands and said, "Peace," the storm stopped. And suddenly the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. And on Friday morning, when the third tree was startled by her beams being yanked out of the woodpile, she shivered when she was dragged through an angry crowd, and she shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands and feet to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. Obviously, this is a fictional story. But in this, we see the ways that God can take whatever it is in your past, whatever is it in your story, and bring redemption. As we collect the dots and we connect the dots, we can move closer to the way that God is going to correct the dots. And we're going to talk more about that next week. Because on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. There's ways that you can think, well, maybe my dreams weren't fulfilled, but I'll settle for second best. This is not God's dream for you. I want you to see that God is in the story redemption business. As we figure out how our story has been written, as we figure out how our story has been formed by our experiences, we can choose to turn that story over to God and let God redeem our story in a way that we never even imagined possible. Thanks for joining us today.